how is your thinking shaped, and what affects your thinking, and what are thoughts and frameworks that we get without even thinking about them, and when do we sometimes second guess ourselves even when we're right. So yesterday I was we're in our second game of chess. Me and Joe Smith were playing, and in that game he actually should have checkmated me. If he had just moved his queen to a certain position, he had my king in check. But he was so worried about a stalemate that he overthought it, made a different move, and I got a stalemate.
Oof.
And I was able to put my king in a very safe spot where he no longer had to move. And I said, Joe, you had a checkmate. And he goes, I saw it. And I saw that it would put your king in check, but I was so worried about a stalemate. I think that's what most people do. I think they actually have a lot more insight, a lot more intuition, a lot more intelligence than they're aware of. But they overthink things. They don't trust their instincts. And they actually make the wrong choice because they don't trust themselves when they're making the right choice. And so today when he walked in the room, I said, I have a new nickname for you. It's stalemate. And
Way to just define someone by their worst moment or by just an average moment.
Well, it's because I know that you're establishing the internal structures. So I'm playing the next game right now.
Right. You are kind of a mental bully when it comes to games. Like it is not enough for you to win. You have kind of to intellectually destroy them before you get there. And that's a part of your advantage, because when you don't talk and it's so interesting, because if we have a game where you're not talking trash, I have a higher chance of winning. But if you have a game where you're talking trash the whole time, it's something about I've gone to therapy for this. I feel like it's a triggering of my childhood. I was having an experimental child, and you played some mind games with me early on. And
only to make you better. I never did anything. No. I was just trying to pour out everything I could into your life.
But with that said, right, the way that I think is, I've been reading this book called The 5 Tools, and it's with Phil Stutz, and I think it's Michael Berry or Barry Michael. There's 2 authors. But essentially it's like the mentor and the mentee. And Stutz has an amazing documentary on Netflix, and it's been out for a while, and I love it. Jonah Hill directed it. It's him and his therapist, essentially. And they talk about the tools, they talk about mindset, and they talk about kind of this idea of what he hated about psychiatrists were that every time a patient came to them, they were kind of told and taught to lead them on a journey into their past. Yeah. And he's like, but the detrimental side of this is that it really brought a lot of pain to the people who needed help in the moment. Like, I don't have the time to wait 2, 3, 4 months to journey into my past. I need some tools right now to combat the anxiety, the depression, the frustration, and maybe the trauma that they were dealing with from their past. And so he created these tools. I think so much in the time that I've done therapy that it gets, I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, it's my mom's fault. Cool, it's my dad's fault. Great, amazing. What do I do with that? How do I take it to a place, because I'm not even blaming, but it's like, of course, it's the environment in which you live. So much of the way we think is determined and based and built around the ecosystem that we grow up in. I think I grew up in a great ecosystem that every person has something they're struggling with or trying to fight through. So how do you build a healthy mental ecosystem for young people or your kids? You start there?
Yeah, I think some of it is you have to decide what you take from what you've been given.
Okay.
And I look back on my childhood, and I chose to take certain things, and they helped me. Most of them helped me in a positive way, even though there was an overwhelming amount of experiences that were negative. So with my grandfather in El Salvador, who raised me for the first years of my life, he taught me how to play chess when I was 3. He never let me have a move. I would cry because I was 3, 4, 5 years old. So of course I'd cry when he beat me in 10 moves or 9 moves or 11 moves. And I'd say, Poppy, let me move. And he goes, when you earn a move, you can have one. And so early on in my life, from the very beginning, I was taught that life doesn't give you anything. That you have to earn the move if you want it. And it became, I'm really grateful to my grandfather. He's maybe like ridiculously competitive, right? And to the point where he shouldn't have felt competitive against a 5-year-old. But he would say to me, I have too much respect for you to not bring my best against you. And it was a very interesting framework. It was both a ruthless approach of going, you have to fight for every move, but it was also an incredibly empowering approach saying, I'm not going to treat you like you're less. I'm going to destroy you because I believe that you're one day going to be my equal, or maybe even my superior. And I, I'm not as good a chess player now, but when I was at my peak, I was a really good chess player. And I owe it all to my grandfather teaching me how to think in that environment. But it translated to other places. It wasn't just on the chessboard. He taught me how to think strategically. He taught me the relationship of cause and effect. He taught me that I could actually think in complex patterns and move multiple pieces in life at the same time. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I just think of like little nuanced things, like I'd be leaning against a wall and my grandfather would say, never lean against a wall, stand up straight. When you lean against a wall, it's a sign of weakness.
Yeah, he taught you to lean right up. He would tell you to stand right up against the wall, but never lean on it.
That's right, so it would drive people crazy. So he not only taught me how to have internal frameworks for myself, but he would say, these frameworks will also impact the way other people think and relate to you, which I thought was interesting. But he also, I was 5 years old and he brought out maps and he showed me how the Soviet Union and Alaska were interconnected, Russia, and US, and how the Bering Strait was actually a path that was walkable, and how the Asians came across, migrated North America, Central and South America, and that those were our ancestors. And so he taught me global migration when I'm 5 years old. And then he said, when you go to the United States, they're going to misidentify you and misdefine you. They're going to tell you you're an Indian. And he goes, and when they tell you you're an Indian, you do not accept that definition of who you are. He said there was a man who traveled to the United States. He thought he was in India, Christopher Columbus. He thought it was in India, and so the native people were called Indians. Why should you be defined by someone else's mistake?
Wow.
And so he always taught me to look at the truth behind the story. And he really raised me to never accept the assumptions that are given to me about truth, about reality, about the human narrative, about my identity and who I am. And just all these little nuances. He even taught me how in the United States, there's like 5 different ways to say water. And he goes, in New York, they say this, and in Boston, they say this, in the South, they say this. And so he taught me that one word can be expressed in multiple different ways, depending on the culture. And I'm thinking, I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, and this what he's teaching me. And I realized what he did. He taught me as if I was an adult. And he treated me as if I was capable of learning. And he never spoke down to me. And because he spoke at a level that was so high, I had to elevate. And I didn't know that wasn't normal. And when people ask, about where did you learn how to think the way you learn, I think some of it is I could have focused on a lot of the stories I'm not telling that are more negative, and they have more of a story of abandonment or disconnection or absence. But I let those other experiences shape me. And your thinking process is not the result of what you've been through. Your thinking process is the result of how you respond to what you experienced.